Jungkook whispered Jimin's name into the dark, and in the same breath, every sound in the house died. The candle on the hallway table trembled once, its flame bending low as if something unseen had passed beside it, and then the silence came down so completely it felt alive. Not quiet, not peace. Silence, thick and unnatural, swallowing the hum of electricity in the walls, the rain tapping against the windows, even the soft rasp of Jungkook's own breathing. He stood frozen at the foot of the staircase, one hand curled around the iron banister, his pulse hammering so hard it made his fingers shake. Jimin, his voice barely left his throat. It seemed to vanish before it could reach the second floor. The house answered with nothing, not the old clock in the dining room, not the settling groan of timber, not the hiss of the storm pressing against the glass. Nothing. Jungkook's mouth went dry. 3 hours ago, he had been certain this house was empty. He had unlocked the front door with a key he should have thrown away years ago, stepped into the dust-choked foyer, and told himself he had only come back for one thing, the letter hidden behind the loose panel in the study wall. Nothing more, not memories, not closure, certainly not Jimin, but the house had always belonged to Jimin in ways it had never belonged to anyone else. Even now, standing in the dark with candlelight trembling over yellowed wallpaper and cracked wood floors, Jungkook could feel him everywhere. In the scent of cedar soaked into the walls, in the faint trace of old cologne trapped in the stairwell, in the memory of bare feet crossing the kitchen at midnight, in the ghost of laughter that had once lived here so fully it had changed the shape of silence. Jungkook swallowed hard and forced himself to move. His footsteps made no sound, that stopped him cold. He looked down sharply. His boots should have creaked against the old floorboards. This house had always spoken beneath weight, groaning and cracking with every step, but now the wood took him in complete silence, as if the floor had forgotten how to bear witness. A chill crawled up the back of his neck. He lifted the candle and turned toward the living room, furniture crouched beneath white sheets like shrouded bodies. The air smelled of wax, dust, and rain-damp rot. Pale lightning flashed through the windows, bleaching the room into brief monochrome. Chairs, bookshelves, the grand piano in the corner with its lid half open like a mouth caught mid-confession. Then darkness folded over everything again. Jungkook took another step. Something moved near the piano. He stopped breathing. A shape stood in the far corner of the room, half concealed in shadow. Too tall to be furniture. Too still to be mistaken for anything harmless. The candle flame jerked violently. Jungkook's hand tightened around the brass holder until hot wax spilled over his knuckles. He barely felt it. Who's there? The figure did not move. Lightning cracked again, brighter this time, and for one blinding second the room was all white edges and exposed bones. The corner was empty. Jungkook staggered back, his shoulder striking the doorway hard enough to send pain shooting down his arm. The candle nearly slipped from his grasp. He stared at the place where the figure had stood, chest rising too fast, throat locked tight. Nothing, only the piano, only shadows. His mind was playing tricks. It had to be. He had not slept properly in 2 days. He had spent the train ride back with his jaw clenched and his eyes open, replaying a funeral he had never attended, a goodbye he had never said, and a name he had spent 6 years trying not to turn into prayer: Jimin. Even now, the thought of him came with a physical ache, sharp and humiliating. Jungkook crossed the room on unsteady legs and set the candle down on the piano. Its light rolled over black lacquer and dust. One of the keys was pressed down. He stared. Slowly, impossibly, it rose. The note should have sounded. It didn't. The silence remained absolute. Jungkook stepped back so quickly he nearly tripped over the rug. No, his voice cracked. He laughed once under his breath, thin and strained. No. No, I'm done with this. Turned and walked straight for the study. If he could find the letter, he could leave. He could be gone before dawn. Whatever this house was doing, whatever it remembered, it could keep its ghosts. The study door stood half open. Jungkook was certain he had left it closed. He stopped at the threshold. The room smelled different from the rest of the house. Less dust, less decay. The scent here was sharper, cleaner, touched with old paper and something colder beneath it. The desk lamp in the corner was on. Jungkook's blood turned to ice. A low amber glow spilled across the desk, painting the room in soft gold. He had not turned it on. For a long moment, he simply stood there, staring as rain flashed white against the windowpins behind the desk. Then he crossed the room in 3 quick steps and reached for the lamp. It clicked off. Darkness surged back in. And from somewhere behind him, very close to his ear, someone exhaled. Jungkook spun so fast the candlelight reeled. No one. The room was empty. His breath came short now, shallow enough to hurt. He forced himself to turn toward the west wall, toward the narrow strip of wood paneling beside the bookcase. The loose panel was still there, thank God. He dropped to one knee, set the candle beside him, and pressed his fingers into the seam. The wood shifted with a soft scrape, revealing the hollow behind it. Inside lay a single envelope, still there, still waiting. His hands shook as he pulled it free. The paper was yellowed, edges curled with age. On the front, in Jimin's unmistakable handwriting, was one line: "For Jungkook, if you came back." Jungkook stopped breathing. His fingers tightened so hard the envelope bent. No, Jimin had written that years ago, before the funeral, before the silence that had followed him like punishment, before the call Jungkook had ignored because he'd been too angry, too proud, too certain there would be another chance. There had never been another chance. His vision blurred. He opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Jungkook, if you are reading this, then something has already gone wrong." He stared at the words until they doubled. The candle flame snapped sideways. A floorboard creaked overhead. Sound returned all at once. Rain lashed the windows. The clock in the dining room began ticking so violently it sounded like teeth chattering. Wind pressed through the walls with a low animal moan. Somewhere deep in the house, a door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass. Jungkook lurched to his feet, the letter clenched in one hand. Footsteps crossed the second floor, slow, measured, one end of the hall to the other. Jungkook's heart slammed against his ribs, not memory, not imagination. Someone was upstairs. The steps stopped directly above him. A long silence followed, then, soft and unmistakable. Came 3 knocks from the ceiling overhead. Jungkook stood beneath them, every muscle locked, the candle shaking in his hand, and then a voice, faint and hoarse and impossible, drifted through the floorboards above. "Jungkook." Was Jimin. Jungkook did not move. The candle trembled in his hand, wax spilling hot over his fingers, but his body refused every command except one: listen. The voice above him had been soft, worn thin by distance and time, but there was no mistaking it. It carried the same low warmth that had once spoken against his throat in the dark, the same quiet gravity that had always made Jungkook feel seen too easily, too completely. 6 years had not dulled it. Death should have erased it. Instead, Jimin had said his name. Jungkook's knees nearly gave beneath him. The letter crackled in his fist. Rain battered the windows with sudden violence. Wind pushed through the old frame of the study hard enough to make the lamp flicker back to life for a single breath before dying again. The room pulsed in dim amber and shadow. Jungkook's voice came out broken, no answer, then another sound from above, slow footsteps, crossing the second-floor hall again. Jungkook stumbled backward into the desk, breath snagging in his chest. His mind reached wildly for reason and found none that held. A cruel trick, a voice carried through pipes. Exhaustion turning grief into hallucination. But no explanation could account for the 3 knocks, or the way the house itself had gone still when he whispered Jimin's name, as if every beam and nail had paused to listen. The footsteps stopped. A door opened upstairs. Jungkook heard it clearly now, the long groan of old hinges, the soft scrape of wood against wood, the bedroom. His stomach turned cold. There had only ever been one bedroom that mattered in this house. He should have left. Every instinct he had left was screaming at him to take the letter and run, to get out before whatever lived in these walls decided it no longer wanted him to leave. Instead, Jungkook set the candle down, folded the letter with shaking hands and slid it into the inside pocket of his coat. Then he stepped into the hallway and looked up. The staircase rose into darkness, the upper floor swallowed whole beyond the weak reach of candlelight. The banister gleamed like wet bone. At the top of the stairs, the hall lay open and black. Waiting, Jungkook climbed. The first step groaned under his weight, and the sound hit him so hard he nearly gasped. It was only a floorboard, only wood remembering how to speak, but after that long, unnatural silence, the noise felt almost violent. The second step creaked. The third, each sound was too loud in the dark. By the time he reached the landing, his pulse was pounding so hard it blurred the edges of his vision. The upstairs hall smelled untouched, cool linen, old cedar, rain leaking in beneath the windows. Beneath it, faint and impossible, was something warmer, Jimin's cologne. Jungkook stopped breathing for a moment. It lingered in the air so lightly he almost thought he imagined it, but then it came again, unmistakable, clean spice, soft smoke, and something darker underneath that had once clung to Jimin's skin and Jungkook's sheets. The scent hit him with the force of memory, a summer storm, open windows. Jimin barefoot on the floor, laughing as candlelight painted gold across his throat. The slow drag of his fingers through Jungkook's hair. The quiet confession neither of them had known how to survive. Jungkook shut his eyes so hard it hurt. When he opened them again, the bedroom door at the end of the hall stood ajar. Warm light spilled through the narrow gap. His heart stopped. There had been no electricity in this house for years. Jungkook crossed the hallway in slow, disbelieving steps. The closer he came, the warmer the air grew. The smell of dust faded. Cedar gave way to something softer, linen dried in summer sun, old paper, candle wax, the fading trace of sleep. He reached the door and pushed it open. The room was lit, not brightly. Not by lamps, candles, dozens of them. They burned on the dresser, the windowsill, the bedside table, their flames steady and gold, casting long shadows over a room untouched by time. No dust veiled the shelves. No sheets covered the furniture. The bed was neatly made in pale linen. Books lay stacked on the nightstand. A half-empty glass of water sat beside them. On the chair in the corner rested a dark cardigan Jungkook knew by sight alone, his throat closed. This room was not abandoned, it was waiting. Jungkook stepped inside, every nerve pulled taut. The floor was warm beneath his boots. On the dresser sat a silver watch, stopped at 2:17. Beside it lay a cigarette case Jimin had never opened but always carried. On the wall above the bed hung a photograph in a narrow black frame. Jungkook turned toward it and froze. It was the two of them, not posed, not formal. A candid shot taken on a rain-soaked afternoon years ago. Jimin half laughing, head turned away. Jungkook beside him caught mid-smile, his hand visible at Jimin's wrist. Jungkook stared at it, pulse roaring in his ears. He had never seen that photograph. His gaze dropped. Beneath the frame, carved into the wood of the bedpost in a hand he knew too well, were 2 words. I waited. The breath left Jungkook in a sharp, painful rush. His hand rose before he could stop it, fingertips brushing the carved letters as if touch could undo them. He whispered, though he did not know whether he was asking the room, the dead, or himself. The floor shifted softly behind him. Jungkook turned. Someone stood in the doorway. He did not scream. Shock hollowed him too completely for that. Jimin stood with one hand resting against the frame, candlelight moving over him like water. He looked exactly as grief had preserved him and memory had ruined him. Dark hair falling loose over his forehead, pale skin lit warm gold, mouth parted as if he had only just drawn breath. He wore the same black shirt from the last night Jungkook had seen him alive, sleeves rolled to his elbows, collar open at the throat, but there was something wrong with the stillness of him. He did not move like the living moved. He held himself too carefully, as though each inch of him had been assembled from memory and silence. His eyes found Jungkook, and the ache in them was so familiar it felt like being cut open. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Jungkook could hear only the rain and the blood in his ears. Then Jimin said very softly, "You came back." Jungkook's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Jimin's gaze moved over him with unbearable tenderness, as though cataloguing every year absence had changed. The line of his jaw, the exhaustion in his face. The grief Jungkook had worn so long it had become part of his shape. "You're late," Jimin said, and the words should have been cruel. They were not. They were tired, quiet, wounded in a way anger could never afford to be. Something inside Jungkook gave way. "I thought you were dead." The silence that followed was not empty. It bent, heavy with all the years between them. Jimin looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "I was."
Jungkook forgot how to breathe. The words did not strike him all at once. They moved through him slowly, like cold seeping into bone. "I was, not I am. Not I should be. Not you were told wrong." Jimin stood in the doorway wrapped in candlelight and said it with the calm of someone numbing weather, and that calm was more terrifying than grief had ever been. Jungkook stared at him, waiting for the shape of him to break apart, for the illusion to fail under the weight of what he had just admitted. Jimin remained where he was, still, solid, painfully familiar. The candlelight caught on the curve of his cheek, the loose fall of dark hair over his forehead, the pulse point at his throat. No pulse. Jungkook saw it then. His chest tightened so sharply it hurt. Jimin was breathing because memory remembered breath. His lips parted, his shoulders rose and fell, but the hollow at the base of his throat remained still. No heartbeat fluttered beneath skin. No blood moved there. Jungkook took an involuntary step back. Jimin's face changed almost imperceptibly. Not surprise, not pain exactly, something quieter and worse, the expression of someone who had expected distance and received it anyway. "I know," Jimin said. His voice was gentle enough to undo him. Jungkook hated that gentleness, hated the way it reached across 6 years and found the softest place in him with unerring precision. "What are you?" The question came out harsher than he meant, sharpened by fear and shame. "What is this?" Jimin lowered his gaze for a moment, and Jungkook saw the old habit in the movement, the brief withdrawal, the measured pause before truth. "When they found me," Jimin said, "they buried what was left." Rain dragged its nails down the windows. Jungkook could not make his body move. Jimin stepped into the room. The candle flames bent toward him as if pulled. "They left the rest of me here." The words landed with a sickening weight. Jungkook's eyes moved over the room, the untouched bed, the half-full glass, the cardigan draped over the chair, the silver watch frozen at 2:17. A room preserved not as memory, as anchor. His mouth went dry. "That's impossible." Gave a faint smile, and it was the saddest thing Jungkook had ever seen. Answer was so simple Jungkook almost laughed. Instead, he felt something colder begin to take shape beneath the panic. Thought, pattern, the first edges of understanding, the letter. Jungkook pulled it from his coat with clumsy hands and unfolded it. The page shook so badly he could barely read it. "Jungkook, if you are reading this, then something has already gone wrong. If the house is quiet, do not speak my name twice. If the candles are lit upstairs, it means I have been waiting too long. And if you hear me before dawn, you must listen carefully." Jungkook stopped. The room seemed to narrow around him. He looked up slowly. "You wrote this before you died." Nodded once. "How?" A shadow moved across Jimin's face, too swift to name. "Because I knew I was going to." Candle nearest the bed sputtered. Jungkook's skin turned cold. He looked down at the letter again, forcing himself to keep reading. "There are things in this house that learned my voice after I was gone. They cannot leave. They cannot take what the walls remember, but they can wear silence like a face. Do not follow me if I ask you to. Do not open the red door. And if I tell you to run, this time you must." Jungkook's hands went numb. He read the final line twice before it made sense. I'm not the only thing here that remembers you. The candle slipped from Jungkook's hand. Wax struck the floor. Flame shuddered violently and nearly went out. Jungkook lifted his head with a jerk. Jimin was no longer looking at him. He was staring at the bedroom door. Every candle in the room bent the same direction at once, toward the hall. Jungkook heard it then. A sound beneath the rain, soft, measured. A second set of footsteps climbing the stairs, not memory. Not echo, heavy, slow. Deliberate, Jungkook turned toward the open doorway, every muscle locking. Something was ascending the staircase. One step, then another, the wood groaned under its weight. Jimin went utterly still, all warmth left his face. Jungkook, he said, and for the first time there was fear in his voice. Real fear. Close the door. The footsteps continued their slow climb. Jungkook moved before thought caught up, crossing the room in 2 strides and shoving the bedroom door shut hard enough to rattle the frame. The latch clicked. The sound from the hall stopped immediately. Silence pressed against the wood. Jungkook stood with one hand braced against the door, breath shallow and wild. On the other side, something exhaled, not human. The sound was wet and wrong, like air dragged through a throat that had forgotten how. Jungkook's stomach twisted. A slow scrape traced the outer wood. Not knocking, fingernails. Long, deliberate, testing the grain. Jungkook stumbled back from the door. The handle turned once, twice, slowly. Jungkook stared at it, pulse thundering so hard his vision blurred. The latch held for now. What is that? He whispered. Jimin's eyes remained fixed on the door. His face had gone pale in a way that had nothing to do with death. That, he said quietly, is what answered when you didn't. Scratching stopped. The silence beyond the door deepened until Jungkook could hear the rainwater moving in the gutters outside. Then came a voice, soft, low, perfectly familiar. Jungkook. His blood turned to ice. It was Jimin, not the Jimin in the room. The voice beyond the door smiled when it said his name. Jungkook turned slowly. Jimin was already looking at him. And in his eyes, for the first time, Jungkook saw the full shape of what had been waiting in this house long before he came back. Not grief, not a ghost, something patient enough to learn love by listening through walls. The voice outside the door said his name again, softer this time, almost fond. Jungkook. Every hair on his body rose. It was flawless. Not merely similar, not close enough to deceive in darkness. It was Jimin's voice stripped down to its smallest textures and rebuilt with impossible precision. The low hush at the end of his vowels, the faint roughness under softness, the intimate cadence that had once turned Jungkook's name into something dangerously close to devotion. But the thing outside used it too carefully. Like a person tracing a smile they had only seen in mirrors, Jungkook's mouth went dry. Behind him, the real Jimin had gone still in that particular way only fear can enforce. Every line of him sharpened, every softness pulled taut. Answer it, Jimin said. The doorknob turned again, slowly, patiently, not forcing. Testing. As if the thing on the other side knew the door would open eventually and had no need to hurry. Jungkook took another step backward. The room felt smaller now, candlelight crowding in too close, the air heavy with hot wax and rain and the metallic edge of panic. Tell me what it is, Jungkook whispered. Jimin did not look at him. His gaze remained fixed on the door. When I died, the house kept listening. The words came quiet, controlled, each one chosen with care. It had listened to us for years, to every fight, every promise, every silence. Houses remember differently than people do. They keep what lingers, heat in floorboards, breath in curtains, names in walls. His jaw tightened. And something here learned how to wear what it heard. The voice outside laughed softly. Jimin's laugh, it hit Jungkook like a knife. A memory flashed sharp and merciless. Jimin bent over the kitchen sink at midnight, laughing into his sleeve because Jungkook had burned the rice again. Rain on open windows, candlelight caught in his teeth. The sound outside the door held the same shape, only emptier. What does it want? Jungkook asked. This time Jimin did look at him. And whatever Jungkook had been bracing for, it was not that expression, not fear, grief. It wants to be let in. A pause. Into the room, Jungkook said, though even as he spoke he knew that was not what Jimin meant. Jimin said nothing. The silence answered for him. Jungkook felt the truth land in his chest with cold precision, not the room, him. The handle stopped moving. For a long moment there was no sound at all. Then 3 gentle knocks tapped against the wood, polite, almost affectionate. Jungkook's skin crawled. Me, the question escaped before he could stop it. Jimin's expression shifted, some private hurt moving through it like shadow underwater. Because it heard how I loved you. The words struck harder than fear. Jungkook stared at him. Jimin's gaze dropped almost at once, as if the confession had slipped free too quickly to be taken back. Even now, even like this, he wore truth like something dangerous. Outside, the thing knocked again, 3 soft taps. Then Jimin's voice said, tender and coaxing, "Jungkook, open the door." Jungkook's pulse lurched. Every instinct in his body strained toward that voice despite the terror crawling under his skin. Familiarity was a crueler weapon than violence. It knew exactly where to press. The sound threaded through old reflex, old longing, years of grief worn thin enough to split. He understood then with nauseating clarity that the thing outside did not need claws or force. It only needed him to want. Jungkook stepped back again until his calves struck the edge of the bed. His hand found the carved words on the bedpost without looking. I waited. The real Jimin followed the movement of his hand, and something raw flickered across his face. "Listen to what it sounds like," he said. "Listen to what it asks." Outside, the false voice smiled through the wood. "Let me in." Shut his eyes, not because he was tempted to open the door, because some part of him was tempted to believe. That was the more dangerous thing. He opened his eyes and forced himself to look at Jimin, to the stillness at his throat, the careful way he held his shape, the grief in him too complicated to counterfeit cleanly. The thing outside had Jimin's voice, but only one of them carried regret like a wound. Jungkook swallowed hard. How do we stop it? The question changed something in Jimin's face, not relief. Something more fragile than that. Hope worn so thin it barely survived being seen. Before he could answer, the candle flames guttered all at once. Every light in the room bent sharply toward the door. Then the knocking ceased. A deeper silence settled over the house, not absence, attention. Jimin went white. It knows. The latch clicked. Jungkook's head snapped toward the door. He heard it clearly, the tiny metallic shift of old brass slipping loose. His blood iced over. I locked that. Jimin moved fast, faster than the living. He crossed the room in a blur of candlelight and seized Jungkook by the wrist. His hand was cold enough to burn. Window. The bedroom door shuddered violently once. The entire frame groaned. Jungkook ran. He lunged for the window as the second impact hit hard enough to shake wax from every candle. Glass rattled in its frame. The sound from the other side was no longer patient, no longer careful. Something hit the door with hunger. Jungkook fumbled at the latch with shaking hands and threw the window open. Rain crashed in, cold and immediate, soaking his sleeves and face in seconds. Wind tore through the room, scattering candle flames into wild gold panic. Below them, the back garden churned black with storm water, the wrought iron fence half swallowed in shadow. "We jump," Jungkook shouted over the rain. Jimin reached him, pale and sharp in the lightning. "You do." Jungkook turned so fast his breath caught. The third blow struck the door, would split with a sound like bone. No. Jimin's hand tightened around his wrist. His eyes held Jungkook, with a desperate steadiness that hurt more than fear. "It can't take me," Jimin said. "It can only keep me here." Impact. The door cracked down the middle. "But it can follow you." Rain lashed through the open window, soaking the floorboards. Jungkook's heart slammed against his ribs. "Then come with me." Something naked moved across Jimin's face, then love, grief, longing, all of it too sudden and unguarded to survive a second look. "I tried," he said. The words were almost lost beneath thunder. Jungkook stared at him. Jimin gave one small, broken smile. And Jungkook understood. The untouched room. The lit candles. The watch frozen at 2:17. I waited, carved into wood. This had not been haunting. It had been an attempt. Every night, every storm, every year, Jimin had been trying to leave. The fourth blow tore the lock free. The door flew open. The thing in the hallway wore Jimin's face.
It stood in the ruined doorway with rain-dark hair in Jimin's mouth. For one fractured second, Jungkook's mind rejected what his eyes were seeing. The shape was too familiar, too precise in all the ways that mattered first. The line of the jaw, the slope of narrow shoulders, the black shirt clinging damp to skin. It wore Jimin as memory wore him, beloved before examined. Then lightning split the sky, and the imitation failed. Its smile was too wide, not grotesque at first glance. Only wrong in the subtle, nauseating way a face becomes unbearable when every feature is placed exactly where it should be, but none of them know how to mean. Its lips stretched around teeth too even, too numerous in the back where darkness should have hidden them. Its eyes held Jimin's shape and none of his mercy. They reflected candlelight without warmth, two polished hollows bright with appetite. Rain blew in through the open window, scattering cold across Jungkook's skin. The thing in the doorway tilted its head and looked at him with perfect recognition. "Jungkook," it said, in Jimin's voice, in Jimin's softness, and smiled wider. "You stayed!" Jungkook's stomach turned. Beside him, the real Jimin stepped forward. The room changed when he moved, not visibly at first. Nothing dramatic. Only the candle flames lifting straighter, the air tightening, the strange pressure in the walls drawing taut like breath held too long. Even the rain at the window seemed to hesitate, its rhythm stumbling for a single beat. The thing wearing Jimin noticed, its smile thinned. And for the first time, something colder than hunger passed through its face. Jealousy. Jungkook felt it as clearly as a shift in weather, not of him, of Jimin, of the original shape. The first voice. The thing grief had loved enough to preserve. The imitation took one slow step into the room. The floorboards groaned beneath it, not because it was heavy, because the house knew it was there. Candles shuddered, wax spilled. Shadows bent wrong along the walls, stretching toward the thing's feet as though eager to touch what should not have been able to stand among them. Jimin said, not taking his eyes off the thing. Jungkook did not move. The imitation's gaze flicked to the open window, then back to Jungkook, and its smile sharpened. It said gently, "Stay!" Voice slid through the room like warm oil. Jungkook felt the command in it, not magic, not force, but something older and crueler. The instinct to answer what sounds like love. His body betrayed him before his mind did. One step, barely half a pace, enough to make Jimin go rigid. Jungkook. The way Jimin said his name broke the spell cleanly, not coaxing, not seductive, raw, frightened. Real Jungkook stopped. The imitation's face changed. Its smile remained, but something beneath it tore. The air in the room dropped so suddenly Jungkook saw his breath. When it spoke again, Jimin's voice had gone thin at the edges, stretched over something deeper. "He left you once," it said, eyes fixed on Jimin. "He can do it again." Jungkook flinched as if struck. Jimin did not. Of all the wounds in this house, that one was oldest. Jungkook saw it land anyway in the stillness of Jimin's shoulders and the minute tightening at his jaw. Not because it was true, because it had been. The imitation smiled with vicious satisfaction. It had listened well. It knew where the floorboards broke. "Tell him," it said, taking another step. "Tell him what happened after he ignored the call." Jungkook went cold. Jimin's face emptied. The rain seemed suddenly very loud. Jungkook turned to him, pulse stumbling. "What call?" Jimin said nothing. The imitation laughed softly, delighted. "He doesn't know." "Be quiet," Jimin said, and for the first time his voice struck with force enough to make the candles flare. The imitation's grin widened. "He never listened well when it mattered." "Jimin." Jungkook's voice cracked on the name. "What call?" The room held still, even the thing in the doorway quieted, sensing the split opening wider. Jimin looked at Jungkook at last. There was no defense left in his face. Only exhaustion. Only the unbearable weight of a truth carried too long alone. "The night I died," Jimin said softly. "I called you 4 times. Jungkook's breath stopped. Somewhere in him, memory lurched awake. A train station. Noise. Anger still hot enough to feel righteous. His phone vibrating in his coat while he stared at Jimin's name and let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, the 4th call sent to silence. His stomach hollowed out. Jimin's voice remained quiet, too quiet. "I needed you to come back." The words stripped the room bare. Jungkook felt himself sway. The imitation watched him with open pleasure. Jimin went on because there was no mercy left in postponing it. "I found the red door open." The letter. "Do not open the red door." Ice slid through Jungkook's veins. "It had never opened before," Jimin said. "Not in all the years I lived here, but that night the house was different. Listening too hard, every room wrong, I knew something had changed." He swallowed once. "I called you because I didn't know what else to do." Jungkook could not feel his hands. Rain struck the floor in silver bursts through the open window. "When you didn't answer," Jimin said, "I went downstairs alone." Imitation closed its eyes briefly, almost savoring the memory. Jungkook wanted to be sick. Jimin's gaze did not leave his. "It learned me that night," he said. "And when it couldn't keep my voice, it kept what was left." Silence fell like impact. Jungkook could hear his own pulse roaring, hear every small, cruel click of memory rearranging into guilt sharp enough to draw blood. 4 missed calls, 1 unanswered door. 6 years of grief built over the wrong grave. The imitation smiled at the ruin on Jungkook's face and stepped fully into the room. It no longer bothered to hide what moved beneath Jimin's shape. Its shadow dragged behind it in too many directions. Its fingers lengthened as it walked, joints bending with liquid wrongness. Its smile split a fraction wider with each step, skin stretching around borrowed familiarity. "You left him with me," it said, almost tenderly. Jungkook reached blindly for the bedpost to stay upright. Jimin moved between them, and for the first time Jungkook saw anger in him, not loud, not wild, ancient. It sharpened his stillness into something dangerous enough to make the room recoil. Jimin said. The candles rose. Every flame in the room lifted high and white. "You don't get to keep what answered in my voice."